He said it like he was canceling a dinner reservation. "We're done with you." My father didn't raise his voice. He didn't slam the table. He just stood in the doorway of the house I grew up in and said it calmly, like I was an inconvenience finally being returned. My mother stood behind him, arms folded, eyes fixed somewhere over my shoulder. Not at me. Never at me. And then my father added something I didn't understand at the time. "We won't see you in court." He was wrong about that. Before I tell you how a judge ended up disagreeing with my parents, let me say this. If you've ever felt erased by the people who were supposed to protect you, stay with me. And only if this story feels real to you, like it touches something personal, like it reminds you of a boundary you wish you'd set sooner, then like the video, subscribe, and tell me where you're watching from. I read those comments. I do. Now, let me take you back. My name is Brielle Mercer. I'm 31 now, but when my parents decided they were done with me, I was 24 and 3 months pregnant. I hadn't told them yet. That's important. The fight that ended our relationship started over something smaller. It always does. My parents were the kind of people who believed image was survival. Appear stable, appear respectable, appear controlled. My father ran a mid-sized construction company in Raleigh, North Carolina. My mother organized charity luncheons and reminded everyone that our family had standards. I was supposed to marry someone appropriate. That was the word they liked. Instead, I married Caleb. Caleb worked as a public defender. He drove a 10-year-old Honda with peeling paint and kept files stacked in our tiny apartment kitchen. He also cried the first time he saw a homeless client get acquitted because he'd actually listened. My parents called him naive. I called him kind. The first humiliation happened 2 weeks after our wedding. We were invited to dinner at my parents' house. My mother set the table with the good china. She poured wine for everyone except Caleb. "Oh," she said lightly, glancing at his suit, "I wasn't sure if you'd know the difference." Caleb smiled politely. I laughed too. Reflex. Later that night, in the car, he said, "You don't have to pretend that doesn't hurt." I stared out the window. "It's just how they are." That sentence followed me for years. When I found out I was pregnant, I sat in our bathroom floor alone. Caleb was at work. I stared at the positive test and thought about my mother's voice. "You can't even afford a house yet." The words weren't real, but they felt rehearsed. I didn't tell my parents right away because I wanted one moment, just one, where something was ours before they judged it. But secrets have a way of surfacing. 3 weeks later, my mother called me into her study during a Sunday visit. She'd gone through my purse while I was in the bathroom. She held the prenatal vitamin bottle like evidence. "Are you pregnant?" she asked, already knowing. "Yes." Her expression didn't soften, it hardened. "With him?" I swallowed. "Yes." She exhaled sharply, like I'd disappointed her in advance. My father came in then. My mother didn't even let me explain. She told him like she was reporting a theft. "She's pregnant." Silence filled the room. My father didn't yell, that would have been easier. He just looked at me and said, "You've made your choice." "I'm married," I said. "This isn't a mistake." His jaw tightened. "It is to us." That night turned into a negotiation I didn't realize was happening. They offered financial help, a larger apartment, a fresh start. But there was a condition. Caleb had to sign away parental rights. They would assist me through the pregnancy and raise the baby in a stable environment. I laughed. I actually laughed because it sounded absurd. Then I realized they weren't joking. "You want to take my child?" I said quietly. My father corrected me. "We want to protect our grandchild." From what? From a life of scraping by, from embarrassment, from instability, from love, I thought. I said no. Caleb said no. That's when my father stood up. "We're done with you." Just like that. I thought he meant emotionally. I didn't realize he meant legally. 2 days later, a letter arrived, a formal notice, petition for guardianship. My parents were asking the court to declare me financially unfit before my child was even born. They claimed I had poor judgment, that I chose a partner incapable of providing adequate support, that my pregnancy was reckless. I remember sitting on the couch, the letter shaking in my hands, Caleb reading over my shoulder. "They're serious," he said. I felt something collapse inside me, not because they were suing, but because they truly believed they were right. That night, I broke down in the shower. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet shaking, the kind that makes you sit on the tile floor and stare at nothing. I kept hearing my mother's voice from when I was 8 years old. "You always complicate things, Brielle." Maybe I did, but this wasn't complicated. This was my baby. 3 weeks later, we stood in a courtroom. My parents on one side, Caleb and I on the other. My mother avoided my eyes. My father looked confident. He thought influence mattered. He thought reputation mattered. He thought the judge would agree. He didn't know yet. The judge was listening.
The first hearing lasted less than 20 minutes. That was the part that scared me, because something that can change your life forever shouldn't feel that short. The courtroom was smaller than I imagined. Beige walls, fluorescent lighting, a clock that ticked too loudly when no one spoke. My parents sat behind their attorney, a silver-haired man named Randall Pierce, who smelled faintly of cologne and certainty. Caleb squeezed my hand before the judge walked in. "Just answer what they ask," he whispered. "Don't react." I nodded. The judge was a woman in her late 50s, calm face, measured movements. She adjusted her glasses and read through the petition slowly, no visible emotion. Randall Pierce stood first. "Your Honor, the petitioners are concerned about the unborn child's welfare. Ms. Mercer has married beneath her financial capacity and is currently residing in a one-bedroom apartment with limited savings." Beneath. The word sat in the air like a stain. He continued, "We have documented evidence of her husband's modest income and student debt. The petitioners are offering financial stability, healthcare coverage, and a secure upbringing." My father's posture straightened slightly. I stared at the wood grain on the table. When it was our turn, Caleb stood. He wasn't in trial mode. He wasn't aggressive. He spoke like he did in his courtroom every day, steady and human. "Your Honor, financial comparison is not legal grounds for guardianship. Ms. Mercer is employed. I am employed. We have no criminal history, no neglect, no abuse. This petition is preemptive control." Control. The judge looked at me then. "Ms. Mercer," she said gently, "do you feel incapable of caring for your child?" The answer was easy. No. But my voice shook anyway, because I wasn't just answering her, I was answering years of subtle doubt. My mother leaned toward Randall and whispered something. He nodded and pulled a folder from his briefcase. "We would also like to submit character references," he said smoothly. "Community members who express concern about Ms. Mercer's decision-making." Decision-making. I knew what that meant. They'd been telling people for weeks that I was unstable, emotional, that I'd fallen under influence. The humiliation wasn't loud, it was surgical. The judge didn't rule that day. She scheduled a follow-up hearing and ordered a temporary evaluation, standard procedure when guardianship is requested. A social worker would visit our home. When we left the courthouse, my mother finally looked at me. "You can still fix this," she said. "There's nothing to fix." "There is," she insisted softly. "You're making your life harder than it needs to be." I almost asked her why hard automatically meant wrong, but I was tired. The social worker came that next Thursday. Her name was Leela, mid-30s, wore flat shoes and carried a clipboard that looked heavier than it was. She walked through our apartment carefully, not judging, just observing. Yes, it was small. Yes, our couch had a tear in one cushion. Yes, the nursery corner was just a crib squeezed beside our bed, but it was clean. It smelled like lemon cleaner and laundry detergent. There were books stacked neatly, medical records organized in a binder. She asked us questions. How long have you been married? What is your monthly budget? Do you have health insurance? Then she asked something that caught me off guard. Why do your parents believe you're incapable? I paused, because that question went deeper than money. They've always equated control with love. If they can't manage it, they don't trust it. She wrote that down. The second humiliation came 2 days later. A mutual family friend called me. I heard you're being evaluated, she said gently. Are you okay? Your mother said you've been overwhelmed. Overwhelmed. A soft word, easier than saying unstable. I didn't defend myself. I just said, I'm fine. But after I hung up, I sat at our kitchen table and cried quietly. Not because of the evaluation, not even because of the gossip, because I realized how easily a narrative spreads when people expect it. Caleb came home to find me staring at the wall. They're rewriting me, I whispered. He knelt in front of me. No, they're revealing themselves. The follow-up hearing came faster than I expected. This time, the judge had Leela's report in front of her. She read silently for a full minute before speaking. The home is stable. Both parties are employed. There is no evidence of neglect or incapacity. Randall Pierce cleared his croft. Your Honor, financial disparity, the judge lifted her hand slightly, is not grounds for removal. A small crack formed in my father's composure, but the judge wasn't finished. However, she added, I am concerned about the petitioner's interference during pregnancy. Attempting to secure guardianship before birth without cause raises questions. Questions. The first shift. My mother's hands tightened around her purse strap. The judge scheduled mediation. Family reconciliation is preferable, she said. This court will not be weaponized. Weaponized. That word lingered. Outside the courthouse, my father finally lost his composure. You're humiliating us, he snapped quietly. No, I said calmly. You started this. His voice dropped lower. We won't see you in court again. That's what he said, but he was wrong, because 3 weeks later, something happened that neither of us expected, and it changed everything.
3 weeks after that second hearing, I started bleeding. It was a Tuesday afternoon. Caleb was at work. I was folding tiny onesies on our bed, the pale yellow ones we bought because we didn't want to know the gender yet. At first, I told myself it was nothing. Stress, hormones. But the blood didn't stop. I remember standing in the bathroom, staring down at my hands and thinking, please, not like this. I called Caleb. I don't even remember what I said, just that my voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. He was home in 8 minutes. The hospital room smelled sterile and too bright. The ultrasound tech didn't say much, just kept moving the wand slowly, her face professional. I searched her expression for clues. There's a silence medical staff uses when something isn't right. I heard it. Then the doctor came in. We're going to need to monitor you overnight, she said gently. There's placental stress. Placental stress, another soft phrase. Translation, if the stress continues, the pregnancy might not. I lay in that hospital bed staring at the ceiling while Caleb held my hand, and I thought about my father's voice in the courtroom. Poor judgment, instability, reckless. The word reckless echoed louder than the beeping monitor beside me. When my phone buzzed, I almost didn't answer. It was my mother. I heard you're in the hospital, she said without greeting. Of course she had. Small towns circulate news faster than facts. I'm fine, I said. You're not fine, she replied immediately. This is exactly what we were afraid of. What were you afraid of?
that you can't handle this." The audacity of that sentence nearly took my breath away. "I'm having a medical complication," I said slowly, "not a character flaw." Silence. Then, softer, "If you just come home," I interrupted. "There is no home." I hung up. That night was the quiet breakdown. Not dramatic, not loud, just me in a hospital gown, one hand on my stomach, whispering apologies to a child who wasn't even born yet. I felt like my body was betraying me, and a small, ugly part of me wondered if my parents would use this. The next morning, the bleeding stabilized. The baby's heartbeat was steady. The doctor said stress management was critical. When we were discharged, Caleb drove in silence. Not because he was angry, because he was thinking. 2 days later, a motion was filed in court. My parents' attorney requested an emergency review, citing medical instability. They had obtained hospital documentation through a mutual acquaintance who worked in administration. I don't know which part hurt more, that they tried, or that someone gave them access. The emergency hearing was scheduled for that Friday. When we entered the courtroom, I felt physically smaller, tired, fragile. Randall Pierce stood with a fresh stack of papers. "Your Honor," he began smoothly, "recent medical events underscore the petitioner's concerns." Concerns. Like this was a budgeting issue. The judge's expression didn't change. She looked at me directly. "Ms. Mercer, how are you feeling?" "Stable, and aware that stress contributed." "And what caused the stress?" The room went quiet. I could have lied. I could have protected them. Instead, I told the truth. The guardianship petition. Randall objected. The judge ignored him. "You're saying the legal action itself contributed to medical risk?" "Yes." My father shifted in his seat. For the first time, he looked uncertain. The judge leaned back slowly. "Mr. and Mrs. Mercer," she said evenly, "the court is increasingly concerned that your actions are exacerbating the very risks you claim to prevent." Exacerbating. The language changed, the tone changed, the direction changed. Randall tried to pivot. "Our clients are acting in good faith." The judge's voice sharpened just slightly. "Good faith does not include escalating litigation during pregnancy without substantiated neglect." She turned to Caleb. "Mr. Dawson, do you wish to respond?" Caleb stood. "Yes, Your Honor. My wife and I request the dismissal of this petition and formal protection from further interference." Protection. I hadn't realized that's what we needed until he said it. The judge was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that shifted the ground under everyone. "This court will not entertain further speculative petitions. If additional filings occur without evidence of harm, sanctions will be considered." Sanctions. My father's jaw tightened. The hearing ended shortly after. Outside the courtroom, he tried to approach me. "Brielle." "No," I said calmly. He stopped. Because something had changed in me. Not rage, not fear, clarity. But the story wasn't over, because a week later, the judge made a decision none of us anticipated, and it didn't just dismiss the case, it went further.
The judge didn't dismiss the case the way I expected. She didn't just strike it from the docket and move on. She scheduled one final hearing, mandatory, and she required both parties to attend in person. No attorneys speaking first, no motions filed in advance. Just us. When we walked into that courtroom, the air felt different. Quieter. Heavier. My parents sat stiffly at their table. No stack of documents, no dramatic folders. Randall Pierce looked cautious. The judge entered without her usual stack of files, just a single folder. Ours. She didn't begin with formalities. She looked at my parents first. "Mr. and Mrs. Mercer," she said calmly,
You have petitioned this court twice to remove guardianship of an unborn child from a mother with no record of neglect, abuse, or incapacity. My father shifted slightly. You cited financial concern, then medical instability. Both claims have been evaluated and found insufficient. She paused. And now this court has an additional concern. The room tightened. My mother's fingers clutched her purse strap. The judge opened the folder slowly. During review, this court became aware that hospital records were accessed by an acquaintance of the petitioners. Randall started to speak. The judge held up her hand. Unauthorized access to medical documentation for use in civil litigation may constitute a violation of privacy statutes. The word violation echoed. My father's confidence cracked. The judge continued. This court will not only dismiss the guardianship petition with prejudice, meaning it cannot be refiled without extraordinary cause, but will also issue a formal protective order. Protective order. My breath caught. My parents looked stunned. The judge wasn't finished. The protective order will prohibit interference, harassment, or attempts to obtain private medical or financial records without consent. She turned to me. Miss Mercer, this court recognizes your autonomy. Autonomy. A word I'd never heard my parents use in relation to me. My father stood abruptly. Your Honor, we were only trying to protect. Protection, the judge interrupted evenly, does not override adult independence. This is not a custody dispute. This is an overreach. Overreach. For years, I had felt something like that pressing against my life. Now it had a name. The gavel came down softly. Case dismissed, protective order granted, sanctions warning issued. It wasn't applause. It wasn't dramatic, but it was final. Outside the courtroom, my parents didn't approach us immediately. They stood near the exit, frozen. My mother's eyes were red, but not from crying, from anger. My father finally walked toward me. He didn't shout, didn't accuse. He just looked smaller. You've embarrassed us publicly, he said quietly. I surprised myself by not reacting. You took me to court. Public was your choice. He inhaled sharply. You think this is victory? No, I said softly. I think this is boundary. That word landed harder than any insult. Boundary. My mother stepped forward then. This isn't how family handles conflict. I met her eyes. No, I said. This is how control handles resistance. For the first time in my life, she didn't have a quick response. We left them standing there. No screaming, no dramatic exit, just distance. That night, at home, Caleb held me on the couch. You okay? He asked. I nodded. But later, when I was alone brushing my teeth, I looked at myself in the mirror and felt something unfamiliar. Not triumph, not relief, power. Not the loud kind, the quiet kind that comes from being legally acknowledged. The protective order paperwork arrived 3 days later. Official stamps, court seals, language that said clearly, interference prohibited. I ran my fingers over the embossed seal and thought about being 8 years old, sitting at the kitchen table while my mother corrected my homework in red pen. You always make things harder than they need to be. Maybe I did, but harder isn't the same as wrong. The pregnancy stabilized after that, without hearings looming, without letters arriving, without whispered rumors spreading through town. 6 weeks later, our daughter was born, healthy, small, perfect. When I held her for the first time, I understood something clearly. Protection isn't control. Protection is presence. My parents didn't call. They didn't show up. And for the first time, that absence didn't feel like rejection. It felt like peace. But the story didn't end there, because 3 months after my daughter was born, my parents tried one final move, and it backfired in a way none of us saw coming.
3 months after my daughter was born, my parents filed an appeal. Not to reopen the guardianship case, to challenge the protective order. They argued it was excessive, damaging to their reputation, unnecessary. I didn't panic when I read the notice. I just felt tired, because at some point you realize the fight isn't about winning, it's about them refusing to lose. The appeal hearing was brief. Appellate courts don't indulge emotion, they examine procedure, and procedure had been followed. Documentation had been clear. Unauthorized access had been verified. The dismissal had legal basis. The protective order had precedent. When the appellate judge denied their motion in less than 10 minutes, something inside me finally settled. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, it was quiet confirmation. This wasn't about misunderstanding, it was about control, and control had reached its limit. After that ruling, my parents stopped, not because they understood, because they had no legal ground left. A week later, my mother called. I stared at the phone for a long time before answering. Her voice was thinner than I remembered. We never wanted this to become permanent. Permanent, as if boundaries were temporary punishments. You made it permanent, I said gently. We were scared, she insisted. You married into instability. You were pregnant. You thought you couldn't handle it. I wasn't unstable. I was independent. Silence. Then, quieter, you've always been strong. I just didn't know how to step back. That was the closest thing to honesty she had ever offered. But honesty doesn't erase history. I don't need you to step back now, I said calmly. You're already behind the line. She exhaled. Will we ever see her? My daughter was asleep in her crib beside me, small hands curled, breathing soft. I looked at her and understood something deeply. Love without respect isn't safe. If you want to meet her, I said slowly, it will be supervised, it will be calm, and it will never involve legal threats again. My mother didn't argue. That was new. 2 weeks later, they came to our apartment. No grand gestures, no gifts, just cautious steps through the doorway. My father looked older, not defeated, just stripped of authority. He stood awkwardly while I held my daughter. She looks like you, he said. I didn't know if it was compliment or observation. Her name is Eliza, I said. My mother's eyes filled, not with drama, with realization. They stayed 30 minutes. No criticism, no negotiation, no subtle digs, just quiet. When they left, my father paused at the door. We were wrong, he said simply. 3 words, not dramatic, but heavy. I didn't rush to forgive. I didn't rush to reconcile. I just nodded. Growth isn't about pretending damage didn't happen. It's about deciding how much access someone gets after they cause it. The protective order remains in place, not because I'm bitter, because boundaries exist to protect peace. My parents see Eliza occasionally now. Short visits, clear rules, no interference, no commentary on our finances, no what-if scenarios. They've learned something. Not humility, maybe, but limits. And I've learned something too. Family doesn't get to define your competence. Love doesn't override autonomy. And courts don't exist to shame you. They exist to protect structure when structure fails. If my parents had simply trusted me, none of this would have happened. If I had folded under pressure, my daughter might have grown up under someone else's roof. But I didn't fold. I didn't scream. I didn't retaliate. I let the system speak. And when the judge disagreed with my parents, it wasn't about victory, it was about recognition. Recognition that adulthood cannot be revoked because someone disapproves. Recognition that stability isn't measured in square footage. Recognition that I was capable,
not because I convinced my parents, but because I knew it myself. If this story felt personal to you, tell me what boundary you had to set. Thank you for listening.